Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm back with our Benny's Bats section for, Tuesday, July 5th. Hope everybody had a good holiday weekend. We still got about a week left of baseball before we move into the All-Star break. So we're going to do what we always do. We're going to break down each game. We're going to look at each pitcher that's on the mound, try to figure out what their weaknesses are, and then figure out which bat's profile to do the best against them. So let's start right from the top. First game we're going to look at today is going to be Atlanta against Philly. Mike Faulty-Newitt's on the mound for Atlanta. Left-handed bats have a higher average against him, more home runs over the last 2 seasons. Look at this Philly team, though. There's not a lot of left-handed bats that you're really afraid of. Odubel Herrera is probably the best one, and he's very underrated for fantasy purposes. Leading off at the top of the order for them, he can get you some hits. He can steal some bases. Even has a little bit of pop. He's jacked out a couple home runs lately as well, so 358 WOBA for him, only a 144 ISO, so not a ton of home run pop, but he can hit one every now and then. But I really like the fact that he has the stolen base upside to go along with it. So he's definitely somebody that I'm looking at. Always goes low owned, and he's been producing pretty well this season. Outside of him, though, there's really not much to look at. I mean, a guy like Cody Ashley is a left-handed bat. He's been hitting third in the order for them lately, so I guess if you want to use somebody that's probably low owned, pretty cheap, he could be that guy. Miguel Franco is probably the only other bat on Philly I'd look at. Definitely don't think he's a cash game play, though, probably only for a tournament, and even then I wouldn't feel incredibly comfortable with it. On the other side, we got Zach Eflin pitching for Philly, and he's another guy that's not that good. 20 innings pitched. He's given up 13 runs. He's given up a couple home runs. He has a whip of about 1.50. Left-handed bats have really been the way that you want to go after him. So a guy like Freddie Freeman makes a lot of sense to me. 378 WOBA, 239 ISO, getting a nice park bump moving over to Philly, which is a very good hitter's ballpark. Outside of him, you got a couple injuries in the outfield. Inciarte's hurt. Malik Smith is hurt. Jace Peterson's been playing a lot and leading off, so he could be somebody in there, left-handed bat. Nick Markakis, another left-handed bat, maybe like an AJ Przinsky. All the left-handed bats are what you want to look at. But remember, this Atlanta team is not a very high-scoring team. They don't have a lot of power, probably not going to put up a big number today. Next game we can talk about Milwaukee against Washington. Gio Gonzalez on the mound for Washington, left-handed pitcher. Right-handed bats have been the way to go after him. They have about a 280 average this year and a whip of 1.47. This Milwaukee team has a lot of guys that do hit left-handed pitching well, so I think that they're in a pretty good spot here today. Ryan Braun, my favorite, 413 WOBA, 241 ISO, definitely somebody to look at. Jonathan Villar has been pretty good leading off for them this year, 360 WOBA for him, 151 ISO. And then you can look at guys like Aaron Hill, who's very cheap, second base, third base eligible on DraftKings. I think he's third base eligible only on FanDuel. He's been tended to hit in the 2-hole when they play against left-handed pitching. So if you see him up towards the top of the order, I really like him as a salary saver. Guys like Chris Carter, Jonathan Lucroy, both good right-handed bats against left-handed pitching, both pretty reasonably priced. So you can stack up these Milwaukee bats pretty cheaply here. I would like it better if the game was in Milwaukee. Washington, not the greatest park for hitters, but I do think this Milwaukee team has a chance to put up some runs today. On the other side of this game, we got Zach Davies. He's actually been pretty good lately. Did have a rough start his last time out, but before that, put 3 or 4 real nice starts together in a row. Left-handed bats have a higher average and a higher fly ball rate against him, so that would be the way I'd try to attack him. Probably a guy like Bryce Harper in a great spot, 444 WOBA, 310 ISO score for Harper. Daniel Murphy, cleanup hitter, 374 WOBA, 219 ISO. Maybe a guy like Ben Revere, another left-handed bat, has been leading off for them lately. He can get you a couple stolen bases, a couple hits, a couple runs scored. And then Danny Espinosa down there towards the bottom of the order. I mean, Danny Espinosa has been absolutely on fire. Couple multi-home run games. I think he's up to 17 or 18 home runs on the season. He hits like 7th in the order, so nobody ever really plays him, but this guy's been winning people money lately, so he is somebody that we need to pay attention to. Next game we can talk about, we got Kansas City at Toronto. R.A. Dickey on the mound for Toronto, and he hasn't been all that great this year, but there really aren't a lot of guys in this KC team that, profile well against them. I mean, they just lost Lorenzo Cain. They're down like 4 or 5 starters from their team last year that did so well. I guess you can still look at a guy like Eric Hosmer, 3 of 9 lifetime against Dickey. A guy like Kendrys Morales is absolutely on fire. The problem you have with these two guys is you can only play one or the other on DraftKings. I think with the way Morales has been hitting lately, he would probably be the guy that I would go to if I was going to use either one of these guys. I'm not a huge fan of R.A. Dickey, but I just don't see this Kansas City team putting up a ton of runs against them. On the other side of this game, we got Chris Young. Left-handed batters usually do better against Young, but he is somebody that has a high fly ball rate to both lefties and righties. So he does give up a decent amount of home runs. And up in Toronto, I think that, he could give up even more home runs. At home in Kansas City, where, some of those fly balls just kind of die in the outfield, it's not as big a deal. But on the road in Toronto, a place where home runs tend to fly out of, I think this could be a tough start for him. You got guys like Donaldson and Encarnacion, 380, 390 WOBAs, 260, 270, 280 ISO scores. I mean, both big-time hitters in righty-on-righty situations. A guy like Devin Travis, young guy who's been hitting up towards the top of the order, been doing a little bit of damage. He makes some sense. Then you want to look at the left-handed bats because that's really what Chris Young struggles with. So a guy like Michael Saunders is in a great spot here today, probably the biggest left-handed bat on this Toronto team. I guess you could look at Ezekiel Carrera leading off, really not a ton of upside for me. But again, if you're putting together stacks of this Toronto team, I think these are all the guys that you want to include. And I don't think it's a horrible idea against Chris Young. He does have some decent starts every now and then, but he also has some starts where he just gets absolutely blown up. So I definitely think this is a guy you can stack against. Next game, we're going to talk about Detroit at Cleveland. Carlos Carrasco on the mound for Cleveland, and he's been lights out to both lefties and righties. I think he's got like a 220 batting average the last 2 years to both sides of the plate. Detroit is mostly right-handed bats. So you look at the right-handed numbers this year for Carrasco, 220 batting average, 6 home runs in 34 innings. So he's been really, really good. The one guy who does kind of stand out a little bit against him is Miguel Cabrera. Cabrera's got a 412 WOBA, 222 ISO in righty-on-righty matchups, and he's 10 of 28 in lifetime against Carrasco with a home run. So if I'm using anybody on this Detroit team today, it's probably going to be Miggy. I do like Carrasco. He's the second highest priced pitcher on the mound. He is going up against a pretty solid offense, though, so I don't think it's an easy spot. But again, he's been so good lately that he's definitely somebody you got to consider. The other side of this game, we got Anibal Sanchez, the righty. High fly ball rate allowed for him, a lot of home runs given up. He's actually a little bit of a reverse splits guy. Right-handed bats have done better against him. And if you look at this Cleveland team, the guys who actually have better numbers against them are the righty-on-righties. It's not the lefties. So I am kind of shying away from some of the lefties, guys like maybe a Kipnis or a Chisenhall. Definitely not going to be guys that I'm looking at today. Lindor, 348 WOBA, 206 lifetime with a home run against Sanchez. I think he's in play from the 3-hole. Mike Napoli, 3 of 10 lifetime with a home run. Again, another one of these righty-on-righty guys who's done well against them. Yan Gomes actually has great numbers against Anibal Sanchez. 7 of 16 lifetime, 2 home runs, 4 extra base hits. So Yan Gomes is a pretty solid catcher option. I think he's like 3,400 on DraftKings. Kind of like him as a catcher option today, even in cash games. And then Carlos Santana, 7 of 25 lifetime against them as well. You probably have Rajay Davis hitting up towards the top of the order. I like him when he's leading off. I don't like him as much when he's 7th. He usually leads off against lefties, but again, with Sanchez being a reverse splits guy, you may find him up towards the top of the order. If you do, I don't think he's a horrible play either. Next game we can talk about, you got the LA Angels at Tampa Bay. Tim Lincecum on the mound for the Angels, and he hasn't really been great. His first start was pretty solid. The next 2 starts, he's given up 4 or 5 runs. The problem is Tampa Bay is also not great against right-handed pitching, so I don't really know how you want to attack this. Do you want to take lefties like, Brad Miller? You got Brad Miller, you got Corey Dickerson, you got Logan Morrison. I mean, none of these guys really excite me, but those are the left-handed bats that you would look at against them. Maybe you can look at some of the righties, guys like Longoria or Forsythe, but on a 14-game slate, I really just don't see a lot of guys that are jumping off the page at me and telling me this guy's a great cash game play or even has a huge upside in tournaments against Lincecum. I think what I would do if I'm going to play anything at all, it's probably stacking up all these guys that we just mentioned on Tampa Bay and hoping that Lincecum gets blown up and has a horrible start and they get into the bullpen and, can add some runs to it that way. That's probably the way I would attack it if I was going to use them, but it's not a high probability play. It's not a team that I really have a lot of faith in today, other than as maybe like a tournament flyer. On the other side of this game, you got Jake Odorizzi on the mound. Right-handed bats have been doing better against Odorizzi. A little bit of a reverse splits guy. They have a higher average, more home runs against them, so that's probably how I'd look to attack them, which means a guy like Mike Trout's in a great spot. 417 WOBA, 285 ISO for Trout. You also got a guy like Pujols Now, I know Pujols hasn't been great lately. CJ Cron is kind of stealing a little bit of his thunder and taking some more, some more at bats and hitting in a better spot of the order. But Pujols is very good in righty on righty situations, so I think he's a sneaky home run target for GPPs today. If you want to roll him out there, he's always done very well, and he's always kind of crushed right-handed pitching. So Pujols righty on righty matchup against Odorizzi, I think is something to look at. I don't think Odorizzi's a horrible play as a cheaper pitching option today too. I'm kind of interested to see what Josh Kalachi's take on it when he comes out with his on the bump article later. Next game we can talk about, we got Miami against the New York Mets. Steven Matt's on the mound for the Mets, and he's really not 100% right now. He's got that issue with his elbow, and you've seen it in his pitching. You know, he's giving up more hits. He's giving up more runs. He's not striking out as many batters. So all the things that we loved about Matt's at the beginning of the season are all the things that are a little bit of a problem for him right now. So I do like this Miami team a little bit. You got some guys in Miami that crush left-handed pitching. Marcell Ozuna, 432 WOBA, 266 ISO. Definitely somebody I want to look at today. He's like 4,900 on DraftKings. I think he's actually the most expensive outfielder on Miami today. That also means you're getting a guy like Giancarlo Stanton, who's turned it around a little. 410 WOBA, 414 ISO score for him. Huge power for Stanton. Another guy that just absolutely crushes left-handed pitching. So I think it's going to be tough for Mats to get through the middle of that order. And then you also have a guy like Martin Prado, who's up towards the top of the order. Great cash game play, 370 WOBA against left-handed pitching. So definitely somebody else I think we should look at. On the other side of this game, we got Wei-Yin Chen, the lefty, pitching for the Marlins against the Mets. Right-handed bats, much higher fly ball rate, a lot more home runs, much higher batting average, really the way that you want to go after him. On this Mets team, though, they don't have a lot of guys that hit left-handed pitching well. The best bat they have is probably Wilmer Flores, who had a huge game against the lefty the other day. 382 WOBA for him, 241 ISO. The problem that I have is everything that I'm reading is telling me that Jose Reyes is going to be making his debut as a New York Met today. Or I should say his second debut as a New York Met, with him coming back to the Mets and playing in the minor leagues for the last 2 weeks. They're saying he's going to hit leadoff and play third base. Well, if he's playing third base, that means that he's pushing Wilmer Flores out of there, and Flores is the best bat they have against, left-handed pitching. So I'm not really sure how I feel about that, but I know Reyes is pretty cheap on most of the sites. Again, if he's hitting up there towards the top of the order, right-handed bat against left-handed pitching, I guess he's somebody we got to consider. But again, I'm not really sure what to expect out of him right now. We haven't seen this guy play baseball in over a year. Well, since last season at least. So, like I said, not really sure which way to go here. The only other guy I'd really look at, Yoenis Cespedes, 364 WOBA, 238 ISO score for him. He does have some upside pop. Cespedes is basically the big bat that's been doing all the damage. Had another decent game the other day. He had an RBI double in that game. I think he had another hit or two. He's basically the guy that's been carrying the offense to, use an old Reggie Jackson line. He's been the straw that's stirring the drink over there. Next game we talk about, Texas at Boston. David Price on the mound for Boston. Right-handed bats, 261 against him with more home runs in 2016. That's kind of been the way to go after him. Texas has a really solid lineup. He should be able to neutralize some of the lefties in there, guys like Mazzara and Chu and, Prince Fielder. But they do have some nice righty bats lately that have been doing some damage. A guy like Ian Desmond is just on fire this year. 377 WOBA, 198 ISO. Here's a guy that everybody wrote off last season, but he's having a great start to 2016. A guy like Ryan Rua is somebody else, very rarely gets a lot of pub. Not a lot of people ever play him, but he's got a lot of big hits against left-handed pitching this year, including some home run upside. 364 WOBA, 225 ISO for him, so the numbers are pretty solid as well. And then you look at a guy like Adrian Beltre, 396 WOBA, 226 ISO against left-handed pitching. I think all three of these righties are guys that you have to look at. I think the way you look at this game is you're either playing Price or you're playing against Price. Price is one of those guys that's either really up or really down. So when he's up, he could get you 30, 35 fantasy points pretty easy on DraftKings. 50, 60 fantasy points pretty easy on FanDuel. When he's down, though, he's also a guy that could give up 6 or 7 runs in an inning. And then kind of settle down afterwards after, the team already batted around once or twice. We've seen that happen as well. So like I said, it's pretty much an up or down kind of thing with Price. So if you're using him on the mound in some tournament rosters, I'm not going to argue with you. I think that's a good idea. And if you're playing against them and stacking up Texas bats, I also don't think that's a horrible idea. So, I think you kind of go either way in this game, although, like I said, I mean, he is one of the better pitchers. He's reasonably priced today. But again, we have seen him get blown up. On the other side of this game, we got A.J. Griffin, the righty, pitching for Texas. This is a guy that had a huge fly ball rate, was out of the league for a year and a half. I want to say he had Tommy John surgery, but I'm not positive about that. But he did come back recently and has been pitching pretty well since he did. Like I said, he does have a high fly ball rate allowed, which gives up a lot of home runs, at least before he had the Tommy John surgery. We don't have a ton of innings and a ton of information to really go on since he came back from it. David Ortiz definitely in a good spot for me. 439 WOBA, 345 ISO against right-handed pitching. Just absolutely huge numbers. I mean, this guy is definitely still getting it done. Definitely a big bat. Definitely somebody we want to look at. Jackie Bradley Jr., 384 WOBA, 282 ISO. I know the hit streak is gone, but he's still been putting up some pretty solid numbers, especially against right-handed pitching. And then after that, you can look at some of the righties here. Guys like maybe a Mookie Betts who had a big home run yesterday. He's been putting up some really good fantasy scores. Dustin Pedroia, Xander Bogaerts hitting in the 2 and 3 hole. As long as these guys keep getting on base, the guys behind them keep driving them in. So you got to look at it there. Hanley Ramirez, another big day yesterday, couple doubles, couple RBIs, couple runs scored. Even a guy like Travis Shaw, another left-handed bat towards the bottom of the order, is somebody that's in play. I really like this Boston offense. They're solid. Even though they haven't had some huge games lately, I still think that they have the kind of pop where they can put some numbers up. So definitely a tournament flyer. The problem you have with them is they're all pretty expensive. Next game, we talk about Pittsburgh at St. Louis. Mike Leake on the mound for St. Louis. Left-handed bats, higher average, more home runs against them. The only real left-handed bat I'm scared of on this Pittsburgh team is Gregory Polanco. Had the 2 home run game the other day. He's been putting up some big scores again. So if he's starting to heat up and he's going to be hitting towards the top of that order, he's easily the best left-handed bat that Pittsburgh has to attack Leake. I guess you can look at guys like John Jaso or Matt Joyce if they get into the lineup too, but neither one of them really has huge upside. They're more cash game plays to me. Joyce, I guess, makes some sense in a GPP if his price is cheap enough where you're throwing him in as a salary saver. He does have more home run upside than Jaso does, but Jaso does tend to bat higher up in the order. The right-handed bats are also pretty solid for this Pittsburgh team against right-handed pitching. Guys like Young Ho Kong, guys like Sterling Marte, guys like Andrew McCutchen. Some of these guys haven't been having the greatest seasons overall, but Kang's got good power righty on righty. McCutchen's always been a guy that's hit right-handed pitching pretty well. He's got that calf problem that they've been talking about, but he has looked a little bit better. I'm kind of wondering if they're going to shut him down before the All-Star break just to kind of give him a little extra time to heal up. But if he's in a lineup, I think he's somebody else you got to look at, especially because the price is so discounted on him. Now, we had a scratch. Jamison Taillon, who's one of the big pitching prospects that the Pirates have, was supposed to pitch, but they just put him on the DL yesterday. They're calling up another kid, Steven Brault. He's a left-handed pitcher. Don't know a ton about him. Right-handed bats is probably the way I'd want to go after him. Remember, this St. Louis team does not hit left-handed pitching incredibly well. So outside of Stephen Piscotty, 432 WOBA, 234 ISO score, I don't really see anybody that I love. I mean, the kid is a rookie, so you never know. This Pittsburgh team could wind up the St. Louis team could wind up lighting them up. But again, I mean, there's not a lot that jumps out at me. I know that the Cardinals are not good against left-handed pitching outside of maybe Stephen Piscotty, maybe, like a Matt Holliday's okay. A couple other guys are okay. But Piscotty's really the only one that stands out as somebody I'd want to use. Next game we talk about, New York Yankees, Chicago White Sox, Masahiro Tanaka on the mound. He's been really solid, low average to both right and left-handed bats, keeping the walks down. He does get tagged for the occasional home run, but as long as he doesn't let anybody on base, it's a solo shot here and there. If you give up 2 solo shots in a game, that's still only 2 runs. You get a quality start if you go 6 or 7 innings like Tanaka has been, and you give your team a good chance to win. So I kind of see something along those lines coming today. With that in mind, and the fact that he does get tagged for home runs, I think you want to look at some of the guys with home run power. Jose Abreu, 363 WOBA, 217 ISO score, probably the top of the list of there for me. Melky Cabrera is another guy we got to talk about. He's been hitting cleanup for them lately. Excuse me, 3 of 8 in lifetime against Tanaka, and he does have a home run already, so Melky could be somebody else Maybe a Tim Anderson at the top of the order or an Adam Eaton. But again, these guys don't really have the home run power that they profile well against Tanaka as a guy who can tag them. I'd probably only use a Chicago White Sox bat as a one-off, and even then, I'm probably only throwing one of them in my lineup. On the other side of this game, we got Carlos Rodon, the left-handed pitcher. Right-handed bats hitting 304 against him, 12 home runs in 67 innings. I mean, what right-handed bats do you really want to use on the Yankees? Do you want to use A-Rod? He's the guy who profiles the best, but, I just really haven't been using him all season, and I am a Yankees fan. So, that kind of tells you how much I like this guy and, what I've been seeing from him. Carlos Beltran, if he gets in the lineup, he's probably the best hitter on the Yankees right now from the right or left side. He's somebody I would definitely consider if he is in the lineup. Remember, he was banged up a little bit last week. He's kind of been in and out of the lineup all weekend. I think he pitch hit on Saturday, might have played on Sunday. I'd have to double check on that. But he's definitely somebody worth a look. And then outside of that, maybe you go down to Starlin Castro if you're looking for a cheap option. Again, another right-handed bat, hits left-handed pitching well, does have a little bit of pop. So Castro might be the other guy to take a look at. Next game we have is Oakland against Minnesota. You got Sean Manaea, the young rookie pitcher on the mound. He's been lights out to left-handed bats, but right-handed bats have really knocked him around. His last start, he faced a very lefty-heavy lineup, so he actually had a pretty good game against them. But he's got the complete opposite today. Minnesota is all right-handed bats. They don't have great numbers against left-handed pitching, but again, all right-handed bats is going to be something tough for him to deal with. Miguel Sano is starting to heat up since he came back off the DL. 400 WOBA, 259 ISO, and lefty-righty matchup. So I really like him. I'm going to have a lot of exposure to Sano today. Brian Dozier, somebody else, right-handed bat, batting cleanup. You can look at guys like maybe Byung-Ho Park, maybe a guy like Eduardo Nunez. Some of the other guys they had are hurt, but I think that these are some of the guys that I'd be looking at towards the top of that order. I do like these Minnesota bats, especially the right-handers against Manaea today. I think he can wind up putting up a pretty good game. On the other side, we got Tommy Malone pitching for Minnesota. Right-handed bats hitting 337 against him in 2016 with 4 home runs in 23 innings. There are a couple guys that do very well against left-handed pitching on Oakland. Marcus Semien probably tops on that list, 390 WOBA, 234 ISO. We're not getting him at a discount anymore. He's like 46, 4,700, so he's priced up there with the big boys. I don't know if I love him that much for the price, but he has been killing left-handed pitching, especially over the course of the last week, putting up a couple home runs against some pretty good left-handed pitchers. So, against a guy like Malone, who's a little bit of a gas can, I definitely think Semien is somebody that's in play if you can afford him. Danny Valencia in that same boat has kind of made a career of hitting left-handed pitching, 386 WOBA, 209 ISO score. He's another guy I think you can look at. And then you got guys like Jed Lowry, who's very cheap, has been hitting in the 2-hole. Chris Davis, who we always talk about the power that he has, even though he's probably better in righty-on-righty matchups, he's still got that nice power against the lefty. So those are some of the guys on Oakland I'd be looking at. Seattle against Houston here today. Dallas Keuchel on the mound for Houston. He's been much better at home this year. Right-handed bats, though, are hitting 286 against him this year with 12 home runs in 82 innings. That's basically been the big reason why he was much better last year than he is this year. He's not getting the strikeouts, and right-handed bats last year hit, way less against him than they are this year. He's just giving it up too much to right-handed bats in order to, continue to be the kind of dominant pitcher he was last year. When you look at the Seattle offense, Nelson Cruz is the guy who stands out right away to me. 455 WOBA, 346 ISO, 8 of 20 lifetime against Keuchel with 2 home runs. So when you're looking at guys to take against Keuchel, I think Nelson Cruz is almost an automatic play today. He is just such a good player in such a good spot. Crushes left-handed pitching, goes up against a pitcher that's been struggling with righties. I don't think I know Keuchel doesn't really have the strikeout stuff to get him out. So I do think Nelson Cruz is going to have a big day. Franklin Gutierrez, somebody else who profiles well against left-handed pitching, although hasn't done well against Keuchel in the past, but he is somebody I think you can consider, along with Chris Iannetta, who's a catcher option, who does hit left-handed pitching well too. With the game being in Houston, it's a good hitter's ballpark. But remember, like I said, Keuchel has been pretty lights out at home. Really on the road is where he's been getting lit up this year. So, I'm a little bit concerned. Outside of Cruz, I don't think I'm going to take any chances. And with Cruz, I don't know if I'd play him in cash, although, like I said, he does absolutely own left-handed pitching. I kind of have a feeling they may try to pitch around him today. On the other side of this game, we got Taijuan Walker. Right-handed bats, higher average against him, a little bit of a reverse splits guy. Walker is significantly better at home. He's a guy who has a high fly ball rate, and in Seattle, those fly balls tend to just die in the outfield and turn into outs. At a park like Houston, that's a much better hitter's park, a much better home run park. Some of those fly balls could turn into home runs, so I could definitely see him giving up a couple runs here. Altuve's 8 of 23 lifetime against him with the home run, so he's in play. Carlos Correa is probably the best right-handed bat they have against right-handed pitching. He's 2 of 9 lifetime with the home run against Walker, but I could see him having a decent game here. Don't really know if I want to pay up for him. There are a couple shortstops that we'll talk about in a minute that I like a little bit more. Kobe Rasmus, though, the best left-handed bat they have, hits up towards the top of the order. 5 of 14 lifetime for him against Walker with a home run. So, like I said, he's probably their best left-handed power bat, and I think he deserves a little bit of recognition today as well. Next game, we'll talk about San Diego at Arizona. Christian Friedrich on the mound for San Diego, the lefty. Right-handed bats, higher average against them. Again, you look at this Arizona order, you're going to have a guy like Paul Goldschmidt, 458 WOBA, 241 ISO, definitely in a good spot. Some of the outfield options like Pete O'Brien, Yosmani Tomas, both of these guys have been smashing left-handed pitching, so I think they're both in play. Both have some home run upside, especially at home in Arizona, good hitter's park. Beef Wellington Castillo absolutely loves hitting at home in Arizona and loves hitting against left-handed pitching. May even be batting cleanup today, so if that's the case, I think he's somebody we got to take a look at. If you want to go with guys like Segura, or if they throw like a Goslin or a Nick Ahmed or Brandon Drury in the 2-hole, I think all those guys are in play. Not really looking at the lefties, so I know Peralta's probably still on the DL. I don't think he's back yet, but even a guy like Jake Lamb, you probably won't see Chris Herman in there today, the catcher. So these guys, the lefties, I'm kind of keeping off my list. On the other side of this game, you got Zach Godley pitching for Arizona. Left-handed bats have been better against them, but right-handed bats have done well in limited innings pitched as well. This guy's a prospect, hasn't pitched a lot of innings in the majors, but, so far he hasn't really looked all that great. With San Diego being all right-handed bats, the only righty I really want to use on San Diego is Will Myers. He's been hitting right-handed and left-handed pitching pretty well so far in 2016. He's very expensive most of the time now, but, he's expensive as a function of the fact that he's been producing, so you got to kind of just take the good and the bad with that. There are 2 left-handed bats that we have seen a lot in this San Diego order. You got a switch hitter in Yangervis Solarte. I think he's somebody that could make some sense as a cheap option. And then Travis Jankowski is somebody I wanted to talk about. He's a left-handed bat. He's been leading off for them, and every time he gets on base, he's basically given the green light to steal. So this is one of those guys that can get you a walker, a single, a stolen base, a run scored, and basically pay off his salary in like one at bat or so. So I think Travis Jankowski is somebody that you guys should keep an eye on, especially if you see that he's up there leading off at the top of the order again today. 2 games left. We got Baltimore at the LA Dodgers. Kenta Maeda on the mound for the Dodgers. And, he gives up a few too many walks for my likings, but other than that, he's been pretty good. He hasn't been able to go deep in the game because of the walks, so I wouldn't use him. But I'm also not really looking to take bats against him. He's got a low batting average against, doesn't give up a ton of runs, never really gets lit up. I know this Baltimore team can hit a lot of home runs, but Maeda hasn't really been giving up a lot of home runs. So only 8 home runs in 92 innings. That's like 1 every 12 innings, I think, or 11 and a half innings. I just don't see this Baltimore offense as being somebody who profiles well against them. Again, like I said, I don't really see Maeda being a guy who puts up a huge number either, so I'm kind of staying away from both sides of this game. If I'm using anybody, it's probably Manny Machado. Just so good in righty-on-righty situations, almost a 400 WOBA, and ISO well into the 200s. And the other thing is that I think he's going to go low-owned today and is a little bit of a discount. So, like I said, he's not my favorite shortstop overall, but he is somebody I'd look at. My favorite shortstop overall is probably the guy on the other side of this game. Chris Tillman is pitching for Baltimore. Last year, right-handed bats hit a lot of home runs against them. This year, right-handed bats have been hitting more ground balls, and left-handed bats have kind of been the way you want to attack them. Corey Seager is absolutely on fire. This guy has raised his WOBA up to above 404. He's got his ISO up to 241. He's hitting home runs, smashing doubles in the gap, just making solid contact game after game. So Corey Seager, probably my favorite shortstop option on the day, and I think he's in a decent spot here against Tillman. The only other guy I'd look at with Tillman having a history of, righty on righties doing well against them, probably Justin Turner. Very good hitter, righty on righty situations. 371 WOBA, 204 ISO for him. So Turner and Seager are probably the only two bats I'm really looking at on this Dodgers team. The last game we can talk about, we got Colorado against San Francisco. Madison Bumgarner on the mound for San Francisco. I mean, we talked about it last time. The guy's been lights out. ERA around 2, whip right around 1, striking out over a batter per inning. I think he's got 10 Ks per 9 right now. And Colorado's a team that they struggle on the road and they struggle against left-handed pitching. So I think this is a great spot at home here for Bumgarner. I guess if you're using anybody, you'd look at guys like Story and Arenado, although Story's been banged up lately. I'm not even sure if he's going to be in the lineup. Arenado's probably the best bat to use against them, but I mean, do you really want to take on Madison Bumgarner? If you want to do it as a low-owned option in a tournament, I can understand the reasoning if you're not using Bumgarner. But I mean, you don't play an Arenado in cash against a guy like Madison Bumgarner, who's been as good as he's been this year. Again, outside of that, I'm not looking at any of the lefties. Blackman doesn't do great against left-handed pitching. Cargo, absolutely horrible against left-handed pitching. And again, they have some injuries. So you're getting guys like, Descalzo and Christian Adames in there. And, I just really don't think that this lineup has as much pop as they do when they're at home. And I definitely don't think they have a lot of pop against left-handed pitching. So I'd be perfectly fine rolling out Bumgarner. It's actually kind of cheap on DraftKings. 11.7 is not a bad price. I mean, we saw him up at Clayton Kershaw-esque like 13,000, 14,000 the other day. So on a slate that's a little bit weak for pitching, I don't mind Bumgarner at 11.7 on DraftKings. The other side of this game, we got Tyler Chatwood, the right-handed pitcher. Much better numbers on the road this season. I think he's 5-0 on the road with like really solid, solid pitching numbers. Whereas at home in Coors Field, he's gotten lit up this year. Right-handed bats actually have done better against him. A little bit of a reverse splits guy. So Buster Posey, really the only big right-handed bat they have left in that San Francisco lineup. 352 WOBA for him, 150 ISO score. So he hasn't been flashing the home run upside, but again, this is a guy that can make contact, always been a very good hitter. Outside of him, I mean, like I said, you lost guys this week, like Panic and Span both went down with injuries. So you're really down to like Posey, Brandon Belt, and Brandon Crawford being like the 3 best hitters here in this lineup. So I don't like Chatwood. I'm not going to use him, but honestly, he's probably going to have a better game than you would expect because San Francisco is really rolling out like kind of like a B team at the moment here. So, again, outside of Belt, who does well against right-handed pitching, Crawford, who's real solid as a lefty bat against righties, and then Posey, who's good in righty-on-righty situations, it kind of falls off the table real quick for the San Francisco team, and there's not much else that I'm really looking at here. So that wraps it up. Big 14-game slate to get us back into it. Make sure if you guys play over on DraftKings, whatever you qualified for this month, the platinum free roll, the gold free roll, silver free roll, bronze free roll, tonight's the night for all those free rolls. So make sure that when you fill out your rosters, you go and make sure to use those tickets. It's a chance to play for some free money with some upside. So, take advantage of it. You never know when you could have a big lineup and, maybe win an extra 1,000 DK dollars or 10,000 DK dollars to put in your account or something crazy like that. Definitely helps if you're, playing with other people's money. And as long as DraftKings is giving it out to us as a, chance to win some free money, we might as well take advantage of it. So that wraps it up for Benny's Bats here at rotocurve.com. Thank you guys for joining us. And as always, stay classy, DFS.